For-profit businesses. Yeah, great. And I'll ask the same question of you. Any exposure to government procurement at this point?
Just what I've heard come out with the launch of Momentum, and I don't really know how to do this. So.
Great. So
but
Chris
I
is
want
going
to do this because I know it's that good.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Are you all ready to go?
Yes.
Perfect.
I think, yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent.
As ready as I'll ever be.
Chris, to answer that question. How do I get this?
How do I get this?
Tell us.
Oh, I love that question. Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's been great knowing Stephanie over the last couple of years, trying to navigate this space. And so what I've heard as I was trying to and get this going, and thank you for helping with that, get up on the screen, is interest in government procurement generally, and what it's about, as well as where does government, federal level, that's where I am, where are we with regards to social? So that's what I was looking to cover today. So some of it's just going to be straight up government procurement. How does that work? And then we'll talk a little bit about where we're at from the social context and how we're trying to leverage that space. For us, it's a challenge, without question. It is a challenge to navigate that space because our rules, our regulations, our laws are not really built around the social space. We have old rules, we have old laws, and they're very layered, and they're complex. And so it is a challenge for us to do so. But where we are, we're seeing some success. And so when we get some success, it allows us to show that we're having success and it hasn't melted the system. And then we can build upon that and hopefully get some more opportunities. And so we're going to do a little bit of myth busting. We'll get into a little bit of our tools. I'm going to jump back and forth on the computer to display those tools and where you can find information, how to leverage that information, and then hopefully, get to the messages that you're looking to hear today, and hopefully build up a relationship as well. As Stephanie said, we're the Office of Small and Medium Enterprise. And it's a shocking thing to hear, but we are a federal team that's actually designed to help. That's what we're here for. We are designed to do outreach and work with businesses to navigate federal government procurement. It's a challenging space, okay? It is not easy. It's got the most rules, it has the most layers. And so we're here to help with that. We understand that businesses, particularly the small and medium size, you're wearing all kinds of hats. You're doing all kinds of things in your business. And so to understand or even begin to know where to look for an opportunity at the federal government can be a challenge to begin with. And so we're here to help with that. And so we do presentations like this, we do seminars, we do one-on-ones with businesses. Doesn't matter where you are, we'll connect with you by phone, by WebEx, by video conference, in person, whatever it is. We have to leverage technology as much as we can. We're a team of 5, so we're not an enormous team. And we cover Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. So we like to tell all our colleagues that we cover more than half the country. So it keeps us busy, which is good. But what I find really interesting about being invited to be a part of this, and I love being a part of the social enterprise and social procurement world, is that the title about trying to finding opportunities in uncertain times, and hopefully I'll be able to show that we have opportunities at the federal level that are there to be had now, regardless of social value and social enterprise involvement on a specific case, but just in general, that there are opportunities there. And so from a social context, we don't have somebody yet that's that role. There's in the Manitoba provincial government, there is someone that's actually in that role of doing social procurement, which is why they've actually been quite successful at it. It's not my role, but I've been leading it. And so that's where I get involved with a lot of these conversations in this way. So what you'll probably find with me is I'm going to walk around, I'm going to talk a lot, realize I'm 4 slides behind, and then I'll catch up on the slides, and then we'll go like that. It's the hazard of doing 20 years of motivational speaking in high school, is you just kind of get talking and talking and talking, and then, oh, whoops. So I've probably done that already. See, that's just who we are. And so fundamentally, we're one of the largest purchasers in Canada. As a collective, as a government, we are one of the largest purchasers. As Stephanie said, we do, and this is my department alone, does $22 to $25 billion a year. That varies based on whether we're buying a ship or a plane that year, because we buy everything essentially from toilet paper to jet planes. The way it works in the government at the federal level is that departments are responsible for a certain level of their own buying. So when that 22 to 25, that's just us, especially buying on their behalf. So what happens is, to a certain level, they can do it themselves. After that, the departments, they define the requirement. So I have nothing to do with the program. I have nothing to do with what they decide they need to buy in order to fulfill their program. So if it's Parks Canada and they need things for Banff National Park, they're going to determine what they need. If it's outside of their authority, they ship it over to us and we do the contracting for them. So that 22-25 is a large number, but it still doesn't encapsulate all that the federal government buys. Inside of that, we do buy such a wide variety. And so there are different opportunities at different levels. So a couple of examples of just where we buy. And this usually gets a bit of a surprise. So yes, it's billions of dollars. There are 300,000 contracts a year. 92% of those are under $25,000. And the vast majority, it's close to 90% of our contracts actually go to small and medium enterprise. Where that gets surprising most of the time is that what we see in the news, multi-billion dollar corporations with multi-million and multi-billion dollar contracts, because that's what hits the news. But the reality is we buy an incredible amount from small and medium enterprise. So the opportunity is there, especially with the variety of things that we purchase. All right. So first thing is, despite being the federal government, we're not a single client. We are separate. So yes, as a common service provider in the government, we do contracting on behalf of almost all of these 100 departments, but they do some of their own purchasing. So we're going to get into how to navigate that from an opportunity perspective based on which types of industry you're in and what dollar value contracts are likely going to be. Because it's a different approach depending on how much the contract is likely to be and who's going to actually buy it. As you can see, larger and more complex, that's when it comes over to us. So here's just a quick snapshot of that level. So goods, up to $25,000, departments are doing it on their own. So Parks will go and do theirs, Canada Revenue Agency will go and do theirs, Canada Border Services, D&D, whoever it is, up to $25,000, they go and buy their goods. Services is up to $2 million, construction $400,000. There are some departments that still kick it over before $2 million just because they can't handle it, but for the most part, that's how it works. So depending on what industry you're in and what dollar value of the contract, then that will determine who's actually going to do the purchasing. Okay. So we hear this a lot. Governments don't buy from small businesses, right? Again, sort of that news feature, 6 o'clock news. We talk about jets, we talk about ships, we talk about multi-million-dollar IT, Phoenix, purchasing and the fix for that one, and beyond and on and on. But the reality is, as you saw from the slide before, most of our contracts are actually with small business, which is great because that's as we know in the Canadian context, that's the lifeline of the country, is small and medium business. I'm going to say this, and I mean this in all fairness. When it comes to how we buy and who we buy from, we don't care. As long as you're a legal entity, it doesn't matter to us. So you can be a solopreneur, it doesn't matter. You can be an establishing local business, you can be a growing startup, you can be medium-sized. Now, medium-sized for us is a bit on the large side. It's 500 people. But most of our work is actually down in here. It's the 1 to 20 kind of range that a lot of that happens. My world and what I do for outreach, I'll talk to anybody. So anybody that calls me up, I'll give them a hand, even if they're a larger organization. But that's most of where our contracting is happening. Government procurement is centralized. So this is a bit of a yes and no. So as I was describing before, it's centralized if it's over a certain dollar amount. That's coming into us in our department, and we do those contracts. But there is all kinds of opportunity that are directly with the departments on their own. And again, it just depends on where that's at. My company is too small. No. Let's just dispel that right now. No. Does it make it harder on your end? Sure. You're wearing the multiple hats, no doubt. But no one's too small to have an opportunity to work with the federal government. The government doesn't buy what I sell. This is always an interesting one because it's interesting to hear what people are involved with and then hear what we actually get involved with. So some of the common commodities we hear about all the time, we talked about them already: technology, heavy military stuff, real property, buildings and such, bridges, yes, professional services, a lot of that for us, and of course construction. But we have all this too. And that's just a snippet of what we have. So I can tell you that when I was managing the team of buyers in Calgary, Saskatoon, and Regina, we consolidated all of our food procurement in Calgary. So we do multi-million-dollar food contracts because we do food contracts for our forces bases and we do food contracts for our incarcerated. So they all need to be fed. Now, our model is a little different than the provincial government. Our model is to buy the food, and then we have staff that prepare, whereas the province buys it as a service. So they buy it as not the food preparation, the whole thing comes together. We buy the goods of food. Exercise equipment, plumbing supplies, yeah, we buy golf carts. Clothing, this is all, again, just a snippet. When I first joined the government, my first contract was influenza vaccine right after H1N1. So H1N1 happened. We had a year to put in, because the contract was going to expire. We had a year to put that in place. Enormous contract to put in place. Then I was on the national strategy for office furniture. Yeah, slight difference between those two. And let me tell you, it was far easier to buy vaccine than it was to buy furniture. Furniture is a nightmare. So the team that I was involved with in Calgary, we did food, we did rockets that cause avalanches on purpose, we bought furniture, we bought custodial services, we bought a machine that divides flower samples for Agriculture Canada. It's all over the place. When it gets really interesting on all the variety that we do, I really like using the example of when we work with Department of National Defence down in Suffield. So CFB Suffield in southern Alberta, they host 3,000 British troops 3 times a year, roughly, for all their training. So the troops come in, they do all this training. So they need to buy plywood. They need to buy paint. They buy fence posts. They buy wiring for those fences to build the fences. They build all this stuff. Then they actually contract out for actors and actresses to play villagers so they can do training with the soldiers. Then they do contracts for makeup artists because they make it look like somebody's leg's fallen off and how to deal with that. And these are all contracts. They are all opportunities. So the variety is enormous because they also then do all this and then they blow it all up and then we got to go buy it again. Vehicle maintenance. There's enormous vehicle maintenance contracts down in that area of Alberta because of the vehicles that they take out on the rough terrain and they bounce around and they get broken and then they need to be fixed. So just again, the variety of things that we buy is enormous. Now, having said that, we don't buy everything. As much as we buy everything, we don't buy everything. And so I've had some really interesting conversations with people. I met a woman in Saskatoon. We had a great conversation. She's very proud of her consignment shop. It's wonderful. And it's a great business and it's fantastic. From a government contracting point of view, it was a challenging conversation because essentially I had to say, really don't waste your time looking at us. We're not a good client for you. Because the chances of us actually buying something from yours is just unfortunately not high. However, we did talk about GC surplus. So when we are finished with things, we actually sell them. So I gave her the opportunity to go and look at maybe where she could buy stuff that we no longer use, or that we have confiscated at the border, or we've seized from proceeds of crime. You should see the stuff that is in there. When the airplane shows up to be sold, that's kind of fun. And then when the Ferraris and the jewelry, the whatever, like it's all in there. So GC surplus, Google that sometime. Kind of fun to see what's in there. But, so we had a great conversation that way. I met a guy in Edmonton. He was really excited about his coffee. Brings it in from Costa Rica. I love coffee. So it was a great conversation. But when we buy coffee, we buy it for a forces base. We buy it for a prison. And we buy it as part of a beverage contract because we can't send a coffee truck and then a tea truck and then whatever to Cold Lake. We need to logistically make sense. So what we talked about was leveraging our information so that they could look at being maybe part of the supply chain. Maybe they're not a direct supplier to the government, but all of our information of who we buy from is open data. It is open to be looked at. So he got excited because then he goes, okay, well, there's this company. You've contracted with these guys. I'll go talk to them. Maybe they'll buy my coffee, and then eventually we'll buy it through that contract. But also, it gives them potential for other customers that company has in order to make some business. So what we try and do in our role is trying to find the opportunities wherever they may lie. It may not be a direct contracting opportunity. It may be a supply chain opportunity. Or in fact, maybe we're just not a good fit, and that's okay too, but at least that knowledge is there. Government only buys from known suppliers. This is an awkward one because depending on the dollar value, yeah, it is a bit about relationship. If it's under $25,000, it's more direct purchasing. So we need to know you're there. If we don't know you're there, then we may not buy from you because we just don't know. When it's over and open competitive, no, we don't buy from known suppliers. We do, our fundamental principles of government procurement is open, fair, transparent. Everything we do is based on those three terms. And if we don't do that, then you take us to task on that, all right? Which then disrupts our entire world and is a disaster. But we have to know. The reality is that open, fair, transparent, when it goes to an open tender, it doesn't matter if we've contracted with you before or not. It is all based on that tender at that time. But if it is under that dollar value, the relationship is important. And so it's why we encourage all businesses who have even just the thought of going and contracting or bidding on an opportunity or wanting to seek opportunities with the federal government to register as a supplier to the federal government. It doesn't matter what entity you are, it doesn't matter what structure you are, it doesn't matter if you're nonprofit, it doesn't matter if you're a social enterprise, it doesn't matter. As long as you're a legal entity, you can register within our supplier registration index. And what's invaluable about that is that that's how we know you exist. So if a department's going to go and do a purchase on their own, and they don't know if there's someone who sells paint in Cold Lake, they might Google it, but they also go to our supplier registration index, especially if that contracting person is not from Cold Lake. So that allows us to know that you exist. And so yes, that is where known suppliers is important. It also helps when we have an opportunity that we want to push out to the suppliers. That gives us a list of who we get to push out to and let people know that there are opportunities there. So if there's ever a thought about looking at opportunities with the federal government, I highly, 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 highly suggest to go and get your company registered. register as a supplier with us. It doesn't guarantee anything. I have to do the old government song and dance. It doesn't guarantee but it does create awareness for us, and that's always a positive thing. All right. Okay. So government procurement is complicated, and you need to know the right people. So complicated when you're first starting out, yep, sure. It's a bit daunting. When you open up a document and it's 43 pages long and it's got all kinds of rules in it, sure, absolutely. As you get used to it, it's the same over and over. Things change, the requirement definitions change, the structure changes a little bit, but ultimately the routine of it is the same. And so it does get easier. Knowing the right people, that's really not of value, okay? Unless you're doing a direct purchase, knowing the right people is irrelevant, because the tender, it's all about how we evaluate the tender, not the relationship of that person. However, if I may say for our team, knowing us does help, because we can help you navigate the space. So if anything after today, from a contact point of view, keep us in mind. Because if you have any questions about the process, that's us, and we'll help you through that. Alrighty, so Buyandsell.gc.ca. From a tool perspective, much like us as a contact, from a tool perspective, this is the thing you want to walk away with. This has got everything in it. Everything you could possibly want to know and everything you'd never want to know about government procurement is in here, okay? And I'll go live to it just to be able to give a little run through, okay? So here's the site, all right? And this has got all of our active opportunities in it. It's got all of our past opportunities, who we've contracted with, and all of our policies, rules, regulations, programs around procurement are all in here. And it is a wealth of information. And the only way I can really describe that is, you know when you have this horizontal nav bar and you hover over it and you get 3, 4, maybe 5 options, okay? That's a nice, clean website. Okay, so when you hover over for businesses, you get this. This is what you get, which is why call me, okay, or email me. Because what we always try and do is give you the most direct link to the piece of information you're looking for, because you can get lost in here. But as a federal government, we don't have much choice. This is all procurement related, and it's all public knowledge, and we need to have it available for everyone, okay? But as you can see right here, register as supplier. So as we just talked about, that's where to do it. If you go to buy and sell for businesses, it's right here, and it'll give you all on what you need to do there. If you're curious on what we do in green procurement, you can click down here and see what we're doing from the green perspective and sustainable perspective. The Canadian Collaborative Procurement Initiative. That is actually a multi-level government buying initiative. We changed that rule at the federal level about 3 years ago. Believe it or not, all procurement used to be separate: federal, provincial, municipal. Federal changed the rules at our level so that provincial and municipal and the MASH sector can all buy from the same place. Novel idea. 36 million people in Canada, and we were separating our spend. 400 million people in the United States, and the Department of Defense can buy from the same place as the mayor in Idaho. They aggregate their spend for opportunity for businesses and make it a central area so that a business doesn't have to look at a federal opportunity and then bid on a provincial opportunity and then bid over here. No, it's going to be. So we're going to see more and more of this coming through. Alberta's been a signatory for almost 2 years, I think. I just got an email this morning that the city of Lethbridge has signed on through the provincial government to then leverage this. So this is going to happen more and more, and we'll get some of these aggregate opportunities, which is really great. For Aboriginal business, procurement strategy for Aboriginal business. So you can see, if you really want to geek out on this stuff, then you can have fun over here with our standard acquisition clauses. That's fun. And our supply manual, that's beauty too, okay? So, but if you ever wanted to know, these are the rules that we play by. And so if there was ever confusion on a clause or wanting to know why we do something in a certain way, you can look it up here. But this is what we have to follow when we do our procurement. There was hands about social enterprises. What industries do we have in the room? What space are you playing in? A couple of examples.
In social work, immigrant serving agencies.
Immigrant serving, okay. Alrighty, let's see if we got, let's go. I think I saw one. See if we see how my internet connection is once it goes through the public one here through my firewalls and whatever. We'll see how we do. Or news training. We may not be able to spin this too well. Here we go. Okay. So it's a pretty robust search term, okay? A search engine within the program. And so we can put in different things and it'll let you know what we have currently or what we've had previously. If you do as active tenders, then we get to know exactly what's happening at the time. So if I go down here, you can see that I can isolate it. I can filter it by goods and services. I can filter it by location. I can see that there are 19 opportunities for cultural education, cultural training in Alberta right now. If I go back to here and we go to active, and then just in general, there are currently 131 opportunities in Alberta at the federal level for procurement, active in the moment. Now, it doesn't mean that it is just an Alberta location. It could be, Suffield base is as well as Saint Jean, like they're both listed, so it'll get listed in here. Or it could be a national opportunity, so it goes across the entire country. But there are 131 opportunities right now. Any other industries in the room?
Finance, insurance.
See if we get anything pop up for finance. Financial sector, emergency response and investigation. Stream 3, we should talk about pro services. And so, again, the search term's quite robust. So it does work well to be able to navigate and see what is active and what is in the past. So whether, again, so we're talking about that direct contracting opportunity or supply chain opportunity, this information is all available, okay? So again, Buyandsell.gc.ca. Some of us, every once in a while, it still comes up about the platform called MERX. That used to be our platform a few years ago. We're not on that platform anymore. And so I like to bring it up because MERX still, because ours open data, MERX pulls all of our information into their platform. But this is the official one. So if there's ever discrepancy, this is it. It's also free. It's also open. You don't have to register as a supplier. Anybody can go and look at any time they want. So this is the source of information that's really, really important. I like to share another one if you're looking at what we buy and where we're buying it, because this covers everything over $25,000. Okay, so it's above that threshold that's come over to us and we've put it up on Buy and Sell. But there's another site. We have an obligation at the federal government to, it's called proactive disclosure. So we have to post every contract over $10,000. So for that $10,000 to $25,000 mark, that information can be found in here. So if you're likely in a business that's going to have that level, it's going to be that likelihood of contract anywhere in that 10 to 25 range, rather than larger dollars, you can find that information in here. And I like to share this because this is at the departmental level. Each department has to post their contracts that they signed. So it's not going to give you all the details of the contract, but it will tell you the dollar amount. It will tell you which department it was, and it'll tell you where in the country that it was delivered. whether it was a good or service. So that, again, can be a nice source of information in order to be able to find out what opportunities are out there. Yes?
Sound very, very layperson-like and ask this 10,000 to 25,000. Let us say my organization gets a little bit of money from the federal government for a period of 3 years, but it's, let's say, 15,000. But then is it still considered above 10,000 even though it's spread over three years?
Yes. It's all about the amount. It's all about the amount. If it was, each individual year, then it would be separated out. But if it's collective, it's all together. Now, this is an important distinction because where my conversation comes from, we really at the government, we have 3 buckets of money. We have contracting money, we have grant money, and we have contribution money. The space that I play in is the contracting money. I'm not involved with funding programs. My department doesn't do them. We're not involved with them. When I get talking to someone who that's what they're looking for, particularly small startups that are looking for seed money and things like that, I try and redirect them to where that area of expertise is. But they're very distinct buckets of money. And so most of mine is around the contracting side. So that, being a contribution, wouldn't actually get displayed in here because this is based on the contracts as opposed to the contribution that you've received from the federal level. That gets reported somewhere else. But it would still be captured that same way. So this can be a good source of information to find out. Now, when it comes to that dollar level and how to navigate, as they're saying, at over $25,000, buy and sell, that's where you're going to find those opportunities. If you're working in a space that is likely going to be under $25,000, that's where the relationship of working with a department can be helpful. And what I suggest there is actually reaching out to the departments. If you have interest in trying to contract with the department, and let's say you do, let's say it's Microsoft Excel training is what you do. Well, a day of training or even a week of training is going to be under $25,000. The department's going to do it themselves. We're never going to see it. At our department, we will never see that contract. We'll never know when it happens or how it happens. That'll just be them. So it's valuable to be able to communicate with a government department if that's what you're looking to do. And so we actually have, and I tried to pull it up, but it wouldn't load. There's something called the Government Electronic Directory Service. It's our phone book. Okay. Now, not everyone's in it, so you're not going to get high-level Department of National Defense. You're not going to get CSIS. You're not going to get our spy agency. Blah blah blah. Okay, that makes sense. But most departments are in there, and most departments are listed. It'll have the person. It'll have their title. It'll have their phone number, and it'll also most of them break down by sub-departments that they are. So it'll be, Parks Canada, and it'll be, the Western region of Parks Canada, and it'll be the different field houses which are in the different national parks around this area, and then it'll be the people responsible for whatever they're responsible for. So you can really get down and actually find someone related to what you do that way. And so it was a really strange one, but I was at a conference. It was a Francophone Business Community Rendezvous d'Affaires up in Edmonton, and they had someone do laughter yoga. It's a thing. I don't know. And it was hysterical. It was really funny. But I got a great conversation with her, and I said, look, you're never going to get something like laughter yoga up on buy and sell. That's just not going to happen. It won't. But if you want to talk to departments, use the phone book, find which departments are in. She's based in Edmonton. Find which departments are there. Reach out to their HR, because it could be part of training. It could be part of that training component. Lo and behold, she got a contract. So it does happen. I'm not saying it's easy. I mean, knocking on doors is hard enough. Virtually knocking on a government department door, we're a little shy, okay? But it does happen, and it can. And I've had many conversations where it has worked. So does it take some persistence? Without question. But it is an opportunity in an uncertain time. and the opportunities are there to be had. Yes?
Is there, so for those small contracts, again, like everything, lunch, if an office wants to get lunch one day and have it catered or something, and that's going to go through this process that doesn't hit your guys' information here. But like, is there still some kind of guideline or procedure as to how they would make a selection?
Okay, so very, very, very good question. So I can't believe I'm almost, how long have I been talking? So like almost 40 minutes maybe? And here's the first time I'm going to say, and it may not be the last time, my absolutely most horrible government answer. Okay? It depends. And usually I say that about 10 minutes into a presentation because someone asks something and I go, well, it depends. It does. Unfortunately, it depends. Now, I can't speak for the other departments. Fundamentally, most departments over a dollar value that they determine, it's a 3-quote rule. That's the fundamental. It's not a mandatory thing. It's just more out of principle that they'll make 3 or 4 calls. You bring up an interesting one though, because in a few slides, which I'm probably at already, we actually, part of our social procurement pilots that we're doing is we currently, and it's about to go live in 3 or 4 days, is a social enterprise and diverse supplier catering pilot. And so the way that one's designed is not, it doesn't specify 3 quotes. It just is creating a list of businesses that either meet the social enterprise definition or meet the diverse supplier definition that will be used by multi-level government. So created at the federal level, but provincial and municipal in the MASH sector will be able to use it as well in order to do these smaller events. So sub $25,000, a list to go to. And so the flexibility in the list is that the department that's going to go and do this, whatever level government it is, they will be able to choose. There's nothing in it that says they have to do this or have to do that. They can go and choose who they want to work with because the rules allow us to do that. Out of prudency, yes, sometimes we do the 3 quotes. And they may decide to do that on their own. So it just depends on the department itself. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. All right, let's flip back to here. How am I doing on time? Not too bad. Okay, see, talked about that already, okay, we've kind of talked about that one already. Tendering, okay. So we have talked about this already. Tendering website is only useful if I'm bidding on opportunities. I think we've seen that with the information that's out there, it's much beyond that. It's not just about the an actual opportunity. It could be supply chain, it could be connection, it could be contact, it could be information, depending on what you're seeking. So it's much, much beyond just the actual bidding on opportunities themselves. Okay. It's ridiculous. There is so much to talk about. I mean, I could talk about it forever. It's nuts. And what's interesting about, I think, the landscape that we're in right now, which I find really interesting, is that I was doing a presentation in Cold Lake, and normally it'd be like this, an hour and a half. They had a couple people cancel. So they asked what else I could talk about. So I talked from 8:30 to 10, 10:15 to 11:15, 1 to 2. There's 50 people in the room, and no one left. And then I had 3 breakout sessions after that. And the first breakout session, half the room came to my breakout session. And do you know what I did for the breakout session? I took a solicitation template, okay? Our generic document that we build our solicitations from, I put it up on the screen and we went through section by section on what it meant. And after that first breakout session, there was a 15-minute break. No one left. They stayed in the room. I'm like, it's government procurement. What are we doing here? But it was really interesting because to me, it was a neat experience in that we're starting to look other places for where opportunities may lie and where we may not have done that before. And the federal government is a viable option. There are good things in there. Are there pain in the butt things? Absolutely. A lot of it has to do with the rules we play with. So when we start talking about including trade agreements, Even as simple as buying stools, a commercially available product, if the trade agreement NAFTA applies, it's automatic. It's got to be posted publicly for 40 days. We have no choice. So it slows down the whole process because we have to follow that rule. So it does create longer term problems. Payment usually comes up, the payment clause that we have, okay? In a small business environment, that's a challenge because our standard clause is we don't advance pay. We only pay once we get the good or service delivered, and we have 30 days to pay you, which in a small business environment, it's not great because you need cash flow. I can tell you that there is a pilot going on right now. It's called the prompt payment pilot. You will not hear about it anywhere else because it's a very internal thing, but it's cut it in half. So there are industries in which we're paying within 15 days. I can see that accelerating, particularly as we hit to more digital operations. Then we'll be able to do that even better and hopefully cut it down even further. So there are some drawbacks without question, but there's also vast amounts of opportunity. Just to get into a little bit of what we'd see from a government procurement and what you'd see when you look at the Buy and Sell website and look at opportunities, these are the four main terms that you will see and how we present options and opportunities. So we have our ITTs, or request for the ITT or the RFQ, the request for quotes, the request for proposal, standing offers, and supply arrangements. And they work all a little bit differently. If we have an invitation to tender, a request for quote, it's pretty straightforward. All we care about is price. Lowest price wins. Done. It's straightforward. There's no variation. This is what we're buying. Give us your quote. Done. The request for proposal is not where I'd like it to be. The request for proposal over time has drifted a little closer to ITT. We get really, really specific in our requirement definitions, which I'm not a fan of. I'd like to see us get back to more of this and more problem statement stuff. But the request for proposal essentially is requesting for a proposal. So in that, we will have different evaluation. We will have the price evaluation. We will have the technical evaluation. And in the technical, we'll have mandatory criteria, and we can have point rated criteria. And so what's important about that is, if it's a mandatory, it's a must. It has to be there. If it's not there, if it's recognized that in your bid it's not there, we don't even look at the rest of the bid. It doesn't go any further. So it's really important that when you look at those, that you define the mandatory, you see it, and you define it well within the bid to make sure that we know that you meet that mandatory criteria. The point rated is a little more subjective. However, we always provide a grid on how we are going to evaluate. Everything is very, very explicit. That open, fair, transparent component, very explicit in how we are going to evaluate you, and then how we are going to award the contract. In fact, it's so explicit you should be able to a degree, self-evaluate. You should have an idea of how well you'll do in the points based on how it's presented. Doesn't mean it'll be exact. We may have a different opinion, and then we'll talk about it. But that's the foundation of how it works. We recently did, and this is on a slide later, but we did a social procurement pilot down in Ralston, near CFB Suffield, in which it's the first one that I know of at the federal level that included social value criteria in a request for proposal. So we had the price component, we had the technical component, do you have the ability to do the work, and then the social value component, in which we awarded points. So that had an influence on the outcome of the solicitation. And so what happened is we put that out to tender, and it was voluntary. It was not mandatory that any of the businesses actually submitted a social value part of their bid. I was happy that actually 100% of the businesses put forward social value in their bid. And so the winner, what they presented to us in their bid, then formed part of the contract. And so it was all about barriers to employment and hiring people with barriers to employment down in that area. and to be able to fulfill the contract. Were there some challenges? Of course, it was a pilot. So there were some challenges after the fact, and we were learning from those and how, people who have visible or invisible barriers to employment and how that impacts social programming that they're involved with. The company was trying to hire people full time. The people over here who were on disability didn't want full time. So we're learning. And so we've had some great conversations with some organizations. We had a wonderful roundtable with some program folks and some social enterprise folks to better understand how we could write those evaluation criteria so that the company can meet the obligation, the people can meet the obligation, and we can actually generate that social benefit at the end. So we're working on it. It's not a space that we get to work in a ton because of the layered rules that we have and our obligations, particularly internationally. But this one was a good one because no trade agreements applied, and there was no security concerns, and there was all kinds of things that we got to I guess avoid and be able to then do the social value procurement. And so it was a great start, but we're looking to find other opportunities to do that. And so that was an example of a request for proposal. We were able to include that, and so we're looking for more opportunities to have that. The request for standing offer and request for supply arrangement, they're very similar. They're essentially lists. Okay. Now this one, when you see this one, it's competitive from the outset. Price is involved. So basically, it is we know we need to buy a whole bunch of this stuff. We just don't know when and where. So paper. Every government department needs to buy paper, but we have no idea which department needs to buy how much paper and when. So what we do is we set up a standing offer that has all the terms and conditions in place. Price, delivery schedule, everything's there already. And then when we need it, we do what's called a call-up. We need 40 boxes of paper in Vancouver. And we call it up, and the company that's on the list that gets it, they have to deliver within the terms that have already been decided. So it allows us to set it up front and then be able to go and access it when we actually need it. The supply arrangement's a little different. It is a list, but it is not based on price and it's not based on competition. We essentially set out the first bit of what we essentially vet the companies. Do you have the capability to do the work in this general area? So I like using computer programming as an example because in computer programming, it could be a different language for a different time period for a different department in a different city. So we know we need the computer programming skill set, but we don't know the refined actual requirement. So what we'll do is once the department decides, okay, CRA needs a consultant for 9 months in X language in Calgary, then once that goes out, we'll go to the companies on this list and then they'll bid on that opportunity. If it is CBSA in Saskatoon for 18 months, that's a different requirement, and then they'll bid on that one separately. So there's a little mini competition done at this level, whereas this one is already completed. There are a number of instruments that are also there where they're in place. I mentioned Pro Services as being one. Pro Services is where all departments buy. It's 13 categories and 156 subcategories that you basically form part of that list, and it's for contracts up to $90,000, 92 or something, whatever the NAFTA threshold is right now. So that's where we go for that. So when I meet someone who's in consulting or IT and things like this, that's where we want to direct them to. So we have a number of these different instruments which are available to be able to be used. All right. Whew. And we'll skip over that one. Okay, security clearance. Security clearance is an interesting one. Most of the time it's not required, okay? We really get into the conversation when we're in Suffield and in Cold Lake where there's a forces base, because if you're going to do work on the forces base, yeah, you need security clearance. So we'll get into that there. It depends on the industry. If it's going to require, if you need access to, information on Canadians, you're going to need security clearance, safeguarding, etc. So that's in the solicitation itself. It will always tell you what what's required, and then follow the process that way. Finding opportunities is hard. Well, I think we covered that. We have a lot of open information in order to find opportunities, and who to direct the questions to. Okay, so directing questions is extremely valuable and extremely important. If it's about general stuff, you call me. Okay, direct all your questions to me. If I don't know it, I'll figure out who does, and we'll go from there. If it's about a particular requirement, something you think a department could use, talk to the department. When it's an official solicitation, it's up on buy and sell. We are going to go buy this, and we're looking for people to bid on it, okay? There is always a very particular name and who to talk to. It's the contracting authority that's on that document. They're the only person to talk to. Where we have a lot of challenges is in communication. We are allowed to talk to anybody up until an official solicitation. We have all kinds of conversation with you, no problem, up until an official solicitation. When we actually hit official solicitation, we will stop talking to you. We won't talk to you at all. And it's usually, there's a lot of confusion around that. And I just like to share it because, to put it in some context. When it's time for an official solicitation, there's actual process in order to ask a question. You ask the contracting authority the question by email. They take that question, they go and find the answer, usually from the technical person. The technical person gives them the answer. Then we go and translate it, and then we post it publicly for everybody to see. And the main reason for that is, let's say you both are bidding on the same opportunity. And I get a question from you, which is very similar to the question from you, just worded differently. And then I answer your question back to you, and I answer your question back to you, but slightly differently. From the open, fair, and transparent component, while it slows everything down, it avoids the interpretation problem. And this potential perception where somebody may have different information over somebody else. So that's why when we get into official mode, we stop talking, and we won't call you back, and we won't email you back directly. You'll suddenly see your question, not your name or your company or anything, but you will see your question pop up in an amendment, translated in both languages, so that everyone is working off the same information. And that's why we do it, because we don't want, say you win the contract, and then you find out that I gave her a different answer, and then you are coming after me hard, which then means we're going to CITT, and then we're getting sued, and then it's, yeah, no. So
continue asking you questions, but the answers would come up.
Correct. If we're in official solicitation period, absolutely. The other really important thing about communication is that every single solicitation has a debrief clause, which means if you do not win the contract, ask for the debrief, because then that is your opportunity, and you have to do it within 15 days. That is your opportunity to find out why you didn't win. Now, they won't talk about they won't talk about the winner. There won't be a comparison. It'll only be your information. But especially if it's point rated, where you thought you were going to get an 8 out of 10 and we gave you a 5 out of 10, that's important information to have. And so a debrief is extremely, extremely valuable in the process. And always, always highly recommend, if you ever go through a government process and don't win the contract, ask for that debrief. It's your best opportunity to get feedback. Absolutely.
I doubt it's probably up here on the services or under the healthcare, but it was posted by the Mental Health Commission of Canada recently that there's 1.6 million Canadians who have unmet mental health care needs each year.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, again, government employees could be in that space of unmet needs. Will an internal peer service ever be offered in a government setting to meet the needs of extra people? Or how would I go about it?
It's an excellent question. I can only answer as a maybe, because I don't define the requirements. So I would look at talking to the HR folks in a department and see where they're at with that. Like using that electronic phone book, call them up. Where are you at with this? What are your thoughts around this? How are you planning to tackle this? I'm thinking of a couple of different opportunities that have been out there and that are out there. I'm just at the very end, I'm going to show the Department of National Defense has a program called the IDEAS program. And so it's a challenge-based program in which Department of National Defense, it's $1.6 billion over 20 years. And they're looking to solve defense and security challenges. But it's not like big military stuff. It's all over the place. One of them was PTSD. So related in that sense, and it was really neat how that one worked. It's not a winner take all in this program. And so what they did is they put out a challenge on PTSD, and they were looking for innovative solutions to combat PTSD. They got 80 plus proposals. They then went through all the proposals, and they have no set number of how many they're going to select. They only select on merit. If they think it has merit, they will go for it. So they actually selected 10 out of the 80 for up to $200,000 for 6 months. So decent money, particularly if you're a researcher or if you are someone in your garage, a solopreneur. That's a good chunk of change. And then from there, they had 6 months with two 3-month intervals. So they had to provide a report at 3 months and a report at 6 months. At 6 months, they all got reviewed again. So the 10 got reviewed, and those that were considered to have merit went on to phase B of it, which is up to $1 million for a year. Yeah, it's significant dollars. And so they actually chose 8 out of the 10 as having great merit. The 2 that didn't go through, here's the money. I mean, it's up to $200,000 based on receipts, blah, blah, blah. But it was basically, here's the money you asked for. Here you go. Thank you. We just don't think it's going to go beyond this for us right now, but thank you very much. Here's your money. The 8 got to continue on up to $1 million. And then the program's only been in play for a little over a year, so we haven't got to phase 3, which is like 5 years and $20 million or something like that. So it's a really, really interesting program. And this is great because this is all about opportunities, right? Here's another area of opportunity to take a look at. Okay, so this is the website here. So if you Google D&D Ideas Program, it'll pop up. The best thing you can do is down the right-hand side is a little box for join our mailing list, right here. All they want is your email address. They don't want your name. They don't want to know where you're from. They just want your email address. As the Director General likes to say, D&D does not send birthday cards. So they are just going to send you an email when there are new challenges posted, because this program moves quickly. Compared to the slow, methodic procurement method that we have in the government, this one moves quicker, much quicker. So in fact, there was a couple of stories where the industry wasn't ready. Government, like the department came, they closed it. 6 weeks later, they were knocking on the door of the business saying, here's your contract. And they went, what? No, we're not ready. You're the government. You're not supposed to be here for another 9 months. Like, sorry, dude. Here, you got to go. You got 3 months before your first report. So it was fast and furious. But there are neat examples. There's one challenge that was about space debris, detecting space debris. There is a company that 10 months after starting the challenge, they're sending a sensor into space. Like, that doesn't happen. And so, but it is happening with this example. Recently, they did a sandbox, which is they invite companies to test their product. So the department sets up the test. So it's an anti-drone technology one, because very relevant with what happened in Saudi Arabia, with drones flying over prisons and dropping stuff in and helping people escape. Yeah, so very relevant. And so down in Suffield, actually, the companies came down. The military set up their drones, and they each came at a different week, so there was no sharing of proprietary information and such. But they each came, and they got to test their anti-drone system against the military. It was kind of a games idea, and they did that. corrosion detection on ships, recruiting women to the armed forces, thermal detection clothing, anti-thermal detection clothing. They got one right now, which is a contest, kind of like SpaceX. You know, if you fly a rocket up, we'll give you $10 million. Not quite that much money. But it's called the Pop-Up City. So they want to be able to deploy 2,000 people for up to 2 years. And they need energy, waste, and water management solutions. And the main reason they're doing this is that 80 years ago, most research was in government labs. Now, it's all in universities and with entrepreneurs. And so they want to tap into this great knowledge that's out there. There are solutions. There are cross-application solutions that are out there. And so while you may be in an industry that has nothing to do with the military, you may have a solution that has a cross-application into the military and what they could be able to use it for. So there's an incredible amount of opportunity here. A lot of the conversation in the main hall was about collaboration. And one of the things that they use in this program is they force collaboration. The university has to be the lead, and they have to bid with 3 to 5 private sector partners. Otherwise, it doesn't count. And so it's making that happen. And so to get the great research that's happening, but bring the entrepreneurs in so that it doesn't stay as a white paper hidden in a university somewhere. It actually becomes a viable business opportunity, which then goes to scale, which then, of course, helps everyone that's out there. Just quickly back to here. I think we have a couple minutes left. How are we doing?
We could probably take 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, cool. So around the social procurement context, I've spoken a little bit about the pilots themselves. So we did the one down, it was a cleaning contract for the married quarters for the British troops down in Ralston. That was one where we included social value, so we did that. The catering pilot that we're doing right now, which is going to go live in 3 or 4 days, that is around social enterprises and diverse suppliers. We've had a couple where we've tried. It's just a matter of working with the other department. Because we don't buy much for ourselves, we have to have a department to have a partner with. And so it's not always easy to explain that we want to be able to do this and that. So it's, again, part of the culture change within the government to try and expose them to the benefits of what social procurement would do and how it would impact into our communities and at large. We have challenges, okay? And our ministers, well, we don't have a minister right now. So our previous minister, who I'm not sure if she's still going to be our minister, so when she had her mandate letter, it said social procurement in it. So the prime minister sends a letter to each of his ministers, and when he sent them in 2015, our department, our minister, had social procurement built in. And I went to a conference where she was there. It was awesome. She gets up there. Right, politician, right? So she's just up there, she's just super excited. We're doing social procurement. It was a big room, it was probably by Social Canada. And we're gonna do this and everything is on the table and we're gonna do every idea and this is all fantastic and everyone's like, yeah, wonderful. All the procurement people in the room are like, we don't have any rules to do that. We're not really sure how we're gonna do that. So she leaves the stage and the next panel is her right-hand man, all right? And he gets up there, and the first question is, so, how are we gonna do social procurement? And he kind of goes, well, we have challenges. Like, he was like, okay, let's settle this down a little bit. The reality is we do, okay? We have rules that are in place, that have been in place for 30 years that don't include social at all. Fundamentally, within the trade agreements, we can't do what's called offsets. So in NAFTA, we can't make a benefit in Canada that's a benefit to Canada over the United States or Mexico. So when you start talking about local, when you start talking about, making an impact in Canada in a community, it's against what we can do when the trade agreements apply.
So then if some place managed to collaborate with those 3 locations, then you would meet.
Well, this is one of the interesting things, is that I've presented this internally. Now, this is where you get interesting conversations. So I said, if we really cared about social procurement and social value impact, we shouldn't care where it happens, right? if we're really globally talking about social value, it shouldn't matter if it's in Lethbridge or in Idaho or in Chihuahua, Mexico. It shouldn't. But we start talking about the political side of that, where you're embedding social procurement into a contract that's going to be in Lethbridge that's not going to benefit the area around Lethbridge. It's not an easy conversation at the political level, but it's also not an easy conversation at the community level either. So taxpayers in Canada are thinking they're going to help social value in Chihuahua. We're not quite there yet. And so one of our big challenges is that in itself, is that we spend taxpayer dollar. And so when we spend taxpayer dollar, there's a lot of the community out there that wants us to make sure we don't spend more than we should. Low dollar, low dollar, low dollar. And how do you start having that conversation that goes from low dollar to community dollar, to social value dollar, to that type of benefit? So it's coming. We know the wave is happening. We were successful in the pilots that we've had so far. There is a lot of interest to do this internally. It's how do we get beyond some of our rules and our obligations right now to be able to move beyond that. I know that there's a lot of interest and conversation around where the exemptions are in the trade agreements. They're mostly around nonprofit, which is great, but it's around nonprofit. Like that's in essence, it's an area, but it's not the exponential growth where we could get, and that's what we're trying to get. That's where we've got to get to. One of the biggest barriers that we have, and it blows my mind that we have the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, that is an internal agreement in Canada of trade with each other. That is the most restrictive one we have. It is absolutely the most restrictive one. And it's such a pain to deal with because we can't do things like different types of set-asides and being able to set aside a procurement to social enterprises or set aside a procurement to women-owned businesses. The US does this all the time. We're the same international trade agreement. They do it all the time. We can't because of internal regulation between the provinces and territories. Drives me nuts. You had a question?
Yeah, well, I think you may have answered it, but the factors that arise from international trade agreements, do they typically then start from like $1? So even those little,
no,
the smaller purchases?
No, they don't. And that's the space we're playing in order to do these pilots, is we're particularly playing in the space where the trade agreements don't apply. Because we have more liberties to do. Much like with the catering pilot under $25,000, NAFTA doesn't apply. None of them do. And so that's where we play. Yeah?
You mentioned nonprofits. I work for an NGO that works on justice systems in developing countries. Mm-hmm. And in areas where we have RCMP officers, like for example in the Philippines or Thailand or whatever, would there ever be a professional services contract that can be done in order to assist their goals in terms of why they're there?
Oh, awesome. Okay. I don't even have time to get into that one. However, talking about future quickly for a moment, and we'll tie it in there. It's a bit of Sean Loney's thunder, okay, if you know Sean. But it ties in well with what I would like to see with regards to our request for proposals anyway. What I'd like to see us get towards is more of trying to solve problems rather than trying to buy products and services. So the way Sean talks about it is buying the outcome. So buying diabetes reduction. I was at a cybersecurity conference speaking at that last week, and the guy mentioned, can we get away from funding the number of arrests we make and then actually trying to spend money to reduce the number of victims we have? Well, that's a shift. That's a completely different requirement definition. So I would love to see us get to there. I would love to see us be able to, okay, here's our problem. Let's buy the solution that'll solve that problem. And I think there are opportunities to do that, even within the trade agreements, where the conversations as they've evolved, particularly in the rooms like this, with Barb and yourself, Stephanie, and with others, an area that's never been challenged, to my knowledge, is something called legitimate objective. If there's a legitimate objective, then you can get exempted out of the trade agreements. and no one's talking about it. No one's challenged it. And so I keep putting it out there, hoping someone's going to challenge at some point. And the likelihood it's going to come from the community to force that challenge on it. Is there a legitimate objective based on health to buy local food for our food contracts? It's a tough one because we've been buying food for 30 years, and to suddenly say there's a health change but maybe. Is there a legitimate objective to do that? Is there a legitimate objective for what you're trying to do with the RCMP in order to have a social impact? Perhaps. Is there something, we did a furniture one internationally, so it's not like we can't do procurement internationally. So we'll probably have to get into that specific a little bit more, but is that around your answer somewhere? Like
Kind of.
in the same sport maybe?
Yeah, like, for example, a lot of the staff that we hire are investigators. For
Mhm.
example, that like go into brothels and find victims of child trafficking, for example.
Mhm.
Where the RCMP has a stake in, let's use Thailand as an example, having a liaison officer there,
Mhm.
whose role is somewhat connected to human trafficking.
Mhm.
Having somebody there acting as an investigator, as an assistant, providing reports to that person
Mhm.
in order to help them do their job more effectively.
Okay, so that's an interesting one because that's teeters on the line between a consulting contract and an employee. So it just depends on how it's defined. So it can be either one. It's just if it's a consulting contract to do it, then it goes through the contracting mechanism. And it's an independent contractor. They're given what they have to do, but they don't get a government computer and they don't get this and they don't get that because that crosses the line into the employee-employer relationship. If it's going to be more of an employee side, then it's more of a hiring practice, so it's an HR side of things. But either way I believe would be viable. It just, the RCMP would have to determine that requirement to go and actually procure it.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, I'm going to have to cut us off here because we've got just 5 minutes to do what we need to do and get back to the gym for the final keynote with Sean Loney, who you've just.
Oh, right.
Great,
Just propped him up.
Yeah, exactly. Great segue. But, thank you so much,
Awesome.
Chris, for sharing your expertise.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And Chris has said, call me directly. So I'm sure if you want to call him directly, he'd be happy to
Can we have
answer
your
additional
email
questions.
Yeah, I have. I've got cards. I've got info. I can spread some up on the table, and please come and grab some. Connect with me. In all fairness, in the next 3 weeks, I'm in Winnipeg for 4 days, Edmonton for 4 days, and then Saskatchewan for 3. So it might be a bit of a challenge for the next 3 weeks as I kind of do these things in different places. But yeah, absolutely. Please connect with me. Happy to help in any way I can. Certainly.
Thank
Excellent.
you for making something like a government thing sound interesting. I did not come here thinking I would be so interested.
Best comment ever. Best comment ever. Thank you. Thank you.
This is for you.
Oh, thank you.
so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Awesome. Thank you very much.
That's hilarious.
That is the best.